So, Yanks, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Yanks, Sligo Yanks in chat. One of NerdGirl's mods, and here to talk about adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
All right, so we are going to be taking a look at all of the different mechanics that are here in the new D&D Forgotten Realms set, guys. We're going to not delve into the ratings for any of the cards specifically, because that'll be in the next couple of videos. But we are going to be talking about the different mechanics and the different abilities that the cards have and how they're going to affect the rest of the cards around them and the different archetypes in the format. So to keep you guys all engaged and keep you from clicking off of the video, we are going to start with the most exciting cards first. Those are the ones you guys care the most about, so we'll go ahead and give it to you guys right now. So the biggest introduction to the set, there's a few new unique things, far more I think than most sets, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a couple big ones, but nothing too complicated, but definitely interesting, especially this first one we're going to talk about.
But a higher quantity of like new weird things, right? Than normal?
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to talk about, guys, is the weird, exciting one. That's dungeons, which makes a ton of sense for the D&D flavor. So there is actually only 3 dungeons that we know of. I'm pretty sure they have said that there's only going to be 3. Is that true?
Correct. There's only 3.
Okay, so we went ahead and put up one on the screen just to give you guys an idea of how they work. And then we're going to show you the cards that kind of synergize with dungeons. Just right off the bat, guys, the way the dungeons work is you don't need to even draft these. You could just have them in your sideboard. You have access to all of them no matter what you're playing as far as any format, right? You don't need to draft them either. I know in Constructed you can just put them into your sideboard and they don't take a sideboard slot.
Yeah, correct. If you actually look at the card on the screen, in the bottom of the card, you see the little T meaning token. They're printed as tokens, effectively, and everybody has access to them at any time.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a really good indicator as well. So any cards that you have that interact with dungeons allow you to go ahead and just get this card out of your sideboard and put it onto the battlefield right away. You can go through as many dungeons as you want. There's no rule saying you can't do the same dungeon multiple times, which is pretty interesting. Quick question for you, Yanks, you're a little bit better on the rules for this. I haven't looked as much into it. Can you have multiple dungeons active at once?
No, because the way the dungeons come out, it's what they're calling venture into the dungeon. And the first time you venture into the dungeon, you'll pick one of these 3 dungeons and put that out onto the battlefield in the command zone. And then subsequently, when you venture into the dungeon again, that's how you advance through the dungeon until you complete it. And then once you complete it, if you get another venture, then you can add another dungeon card, whether it be the same one again or one of the other 2.
I did know that, but I didn't know that there was only like, one per time. So that definitely makes sense. I mean, I can't really think of a ton of reasons why you would want to do that because usually the bottom of the dungeon is the highest payoff anyway. So you can see in this dungeon, some of them, they have different layouts. Some are shorter, some are longer. This is the longer of the 3. And you can take different paths, which is really cool. This one, no matter which side you take, you can then swing to the other side, whereas not all of the dungeons allow you to do that. If you choose one path, you're stuck on that side of the card. So that's kind of interesting and unique.
Yeah, there's definitely some strategy involved as to which side of the dungeons you go on based on your matchup or based on just what you need at the time.
What your deck is trying to do. Some things are going to be way more relevant to your deck's strategy.
Agreed. And some of the effects are fairly small, like scry 1, you gain 1 life, but some of them can have big impacts on the game.
All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look. I think I picked out 2 different types of Enter the Dungeon cards, just to give you guys an idea of where you're going to be seeing these sort of dungeon interactions. The first one is the Shortcutseeker. So whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, you enter the dungeon or advance to a further room. So this is going to work really good with anything that can possibly give it an evasion, but it is a card that can trigger multiple dungeon steps by itself. So it's not like a spell can only do it one time. There are cards that have ETB effects to do it, and that's just going to give you that one trigger. So the synergy there is pretty mild, but in cards like this where you can be triggering the dungeon abilities multiple times, you're going to be getting a ton more value out of those dungeons.
Yeah, I think the most common one you will see is the when it enters battlefield, venture into the dungeon. And for those cards, and we'll talk about this when we go into the cards themselves, that's just kind of a little bonus to the card. But here it's
Definitely.
actually like kind of part of a theme because you're trying to trigger it multiple times. You can give it evasion, you can give it double strike, it'll trigger twice, that sort of thing.
I like that you said bonus because a lot of the ones that have just the ETB dungeon effect, you want those cards to really be good on their own, and it is just a bonus. Whereas cards like this, if you have enough of them, you can say that getting multiple triggers on the dungeon is part of their value. So you can actually rate it a little bit higher than its mana cost or body stats might suggest.
Yeah, it becomes just part of the theme of your deck as opposed to just, I got a nice little bonus on top of this card that I'd play anyway.
So the other thing, this is also on a creature, so it's kind of similar, but I did want to show you guys that you can see enter the dungeon as a mana sink as well. And there are several cards, including artifacts, that have this ability where at sorcery speed, you can enter the dungeon or progress into the next level of your dungeon room.
Yeah, being able to basically trigger this on demand, albeit only at sorcery speed, gives you a lot more flexibility on when you can, on being able to plan around getting those dungeon triggers.
I did think this one was specifically a bit weird, which I'll get into more, but having it on a 1/1 for 1 flyer seemed very strange to me. But so that the point being is that you're going to see these enter the dungeon things on a wide range of cards, not just a select few, because you're seeing it here. You're seeing a weird sorcery speed mana sink on what is usually a very aggressive creature slot.
Yeah, it's not to get too far into analyzing a specific card. It's interesting because this would be a great card for whenever it deals damage to a player type trigger, a cheap evasive threat.
Mm-hmm.
But having a mana sink attached to a 1-mana 1/1 means it's also relevant in the late game, which is nice.
I would expect to see these two abilities flipped, right? Whenever it deals damage to a player on the 1/1 flyer for 1, and then a mana sink on the 2/5, right?
Sure, yeah. That might be a little too good on the 1/1 flyer, though.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Maybe when it hits, you could roll a dice, which
yes,
coincidentally is possibly one of our next topics. But the last thing we want to touch on real quick before we leave the dungeon is that there are cards like Gloomstalker here that actually will synergize with having completed dungeons or being in dungeons. So it's not just the ability of the dungeon itself. So even if you don't think that the dungeon rooms are usually pretty small, like Yanks was saying, like a treasure token or a small scry, you also get to add a ton of value to some of your cards around, making a really nice synergistic deck.
Yeah, we've also seen one card in this set that so far, with some cards still to be spoiled, that can affect the triggers, doubling triggers, for example. So there are some nice cards that are sort of tangentially related to dungeons to keep an eye out for if you're drafting a deck with lots of venture triggers.
Yeah, I think that when people see the dungeon, they're thinking that a lot of just one-time ETB triggers, and it's not going to be super relevant. But as you guys can see from cards like Gloomstalker and the ones that have recurable triggers to venture, then it is a archetype all on its own. I think it's going to be a very solid strategy, and it has all of the pieces it needs.
Yeah, the nice thing about a card like Gloomstalker is 3 mana 2/3 is kind of whatever, but those cards are typically pretty bad in the late game. But as long as you've completed a dungeon, by the time you complete it, that's a late game focus ability. So it actually makes something that's not relevant in the late game maybe relevant again later on.
Yep, definitely. I like anything that fills your curve. Normally 2 mana 3/2s are like baseline 2s on our rating scale, just because they fill your curve and stop you from getting run over. You're never happy to play them, but anything that then gets better over time and becomes a better draw later than it was initially, or even if it's on the battlefield, just gets a bonus later in the game, I'm always a huge fan of those cards.
Agreed.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is die rolling. Now, there has been some things where you can flip a coin before, but we've never really rolled D20s before. If you guys have ever played D&D or some of the Pathfinder games that are always near and dear to my heart, you guys will recognize a lot of these dice layouts, dice result layouts, which is pretty neat mechanic, I think, that they're adding.
Yeah, the only times we've really seen dice rolling specifically in the game is in the unsets, and even then it was never D20s. So it's an interesting addition, albeit not that much different than the whole flip a coin concept that we have seen in Black Border before.
Yes. So I picked a, moderately simple one. Some of the die roll ones get a little crazier. So this one is very similar to an artifact we've seen in the past. We often see like 1 mana, pay 3, sacrifice, deal 3 damage, and then there was a neg 5 one in a most recent set. I don't remember what the name of it was, but it had a similar cost: 5 mana to sacrifice it, give -5/-5, I believe.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that card either, but that does sound familiar.
Yeah. I think, was it in Dominaria? You get it back with a 3/5 elephant. Not relevant.
Yeah, I can't remember that. I can't remember names. Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, because it had historic triggers, so it's definitely Dominaria.
Something candle. Had a picture of a skull and a candle.
Yep.
Swear. All right, so let's talk about this card a little bit, guys. So you pay 1, it has flash, so you can sneak it out. It's cost 6 mana, but like, let's say you're on 4. You can play it on your opponent's end step, so they don't necessarily see it coming. So it's got a little bit of like mana cost flexibility here, getting to cast the 6 mana over 2 turns slightly. And then you pay 5 to sacrifice it, you roll your dice. So you have a slightly higher chance to get the top end, but I like the idea of this card because the difference between the 1 through 9 and the 10 through 20 is not huge. Some of the cards, they do have pretty drastic results, but this one is, either way, it's going to likely kill their creature, but then you get the bonus treasure token if you get the higher roll. So I like that there is some variance, but the variance isn't game breaking.
Yeah, the general complaint about this type of card is going to be variance, but you're going to get the effect you want. It's just, hey, I get something else with it if I happen to roll well.
Which adds a lot of flavor to the set, and I think that that's what this set is all about. So I'm a huge fan of these die rolling cards, and I think that the way that they laid at least this card out is going to tone down that variance, but give us all that flavor that we really want.
Yeah, it's not laid out as like the die roll is pass fail. The die roll is pass or pass a little better.
Pass plus.
Yeah.
All right. So another thing I wanted to just briefly show you guys is that you can see those die rolling cards on permanents like artifacts, but you can also see spells that result in die rolls. And a lot of the times you'll see this 20 as a crit, which is a really cool flavor bit for D&D as well, for those of you guys who are fans. But again, 1 through 9, draw 2 cards. So the downside is basically 1 extra mana for divination at instant speed. So honestly, there's no downside. I would pay 4 mana for an instant speed divination, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they printed that card in Kanzatark here. I think it was Weave Fate. It was just 4 mana instant speed divination. It was playable.
Yeah, definitely happy with this card, even at the fail rate. And then if you get the top end of the spectrum, or the die roll, you get just a bonus scry, which now is a pretty big payoff. And then after that, you can scry 3, draw 3 for critical, which is quite a bit of a swing. That makes that a great card.
Oh yeah, I mean, you hit that 20, it feels kind of game breaking.
Yeah, it does, definitely. So like at its worst, it's playable and what we would expect to see at common. And then there's, a little bit more variance than we saw in the last card. We're getting a little bit too into ratings. My bad.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited about the cards.
It's hard not to.
So point being, guys, is that, it's not pass fail like we were talking about before. And I'm excited to see what the rest of these die rolling cards have to offer. But even if a card doesn't have die rolling, we have cards like the Devil's Chosen here, which actually cares a lot about the cards around it that are rolling dice. And this card... Oh, go ahead.
I would say, yeah, you get some cards in the set that, in this case, has 2 different things. It cares about just any time you roll a die, you get something, but also it cares about the result of the die on a different card as a trigger. So you get 2 different effects here.
Yeah, and honestly, the effect of this being a 10 or higher, which is more than half the dice, is a really good extra ability.
Yeah, but better than 50-50 shot to draw a free card when you're already happy that you've given your 3/3 flying and menace. Seems great.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next pretty unique mechanic that we've never seen before is class cards. Now, these look a lot like sagas, so we think that, you know, people are going to mix those up a bit, and in standard they might be a little bit wonky, especially for people who have taken a break and come back, so be wary of that. But in a self-contained set, I love the idea of class cards. I think they're pretty neat. What do you think?
I like the idea of them. The saga thing worries me a little bit, more so for paper than for arena play. Just because they look, you know, this layout is something we saw them kind of uniquely bring into sagas, and then they do it again, but they work very differently. They don't automatically advance. The abilities stack. They don't go away. It's I think people get used to it quickly enough. Like, I don't think it's a big concern, but it's just something to keep an eye out for early on the set.
All right, so looking at the class cards, guys, just to give you like a little heads up of how they work. So you play it for its top right mana cost, and then most of them have an initial ability just for being level 1. So in that, you know, in this case, it's you have no maximum hand size for 1 mana in a card, which, you know, in limited isn't great. But then you can pay 2 mana and you make your class level 2, so your character has leveled up, your character sheet. For flavor, but you still get to keep that initial bonus of your hand size, and you get whatever your ability, your level 2 ability is. And then so on and so forth, you can level up to 3, but you don't re-trigger your 2 ability, but you're technically, you still have all of the abilities, but it's already done it, right? But you're still going to be getting to keep that maximum hand size.
Yeah, a decent number of the classes are structured like this, where you have a static ability as the first one, and then triggered abilities after that. But not all of them. Some of them have multiple statics. So you just gotta, you know, keep an eye on the wording on these cards and try to make sure whoever, again, for paper play, wherever you're playing these cards, that you're very carefully keeping track of what level things are on.
Yeah, for paper play, make sure that, so like you'll notice that level 2 is just like a one-time activated, you know, hitting level 2 activates this one time, versus level 3, which is an activated thing that will happen multiple times in a game.
To answer one question from chat, yes, as far as I know, these are not, don't have any sort of legendary rule. You can be multiple classes.
Yes. Yeah, and also, guys, these are going to just stay in play, sort of like enchantments. Once they've hit level 3, you can continue to get the benefits from, in this case, level 1 and 3 for the remainder of the game, unless they're destroyed. Which is the difference between this and sagas.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a huge concern. I just think it's something to keep an eye out for early on. As people get used to a new card type, always something to worry about when you've got a brand new type of card in the play.
Yeah, I worry that some people so used to sagas will hit level 3, and then if it's like a different, you know, one-time ability or something that's not so obvious, just put it into the graveyard.
Yeah, or if you just, on your turn, you draw your card and just automatically try to tick it up.
Yes, LK, you can bounce permanents and reset them. If you wanted to, like, say, get level 2 again, that's definitely a possibility. All right, let's go ahead and move on. This is one of our last mechanics that we're going to go over today, guys, and that is Ward. We have the very scary D&D Tarrasque, which, you know, is the bane of many Magic players' existence. So yeah, they've reintroduced this. This is a mechanic we've seen a lot, including in the last set. So it basically means it's an additional cost to basically touch that creature, to target it in any way.
Yeah, Ward was introduced as a keyword last set, although the ability existed on cards like Frost Titan before that. They just keyworded it finally, and it's going to recur in multiple sets. It occurs in not all over the place, but a handful of cards in this set. And just kind of wanted to give a quick reminder of what it does, since it is not going to be reminder texted everywhere like it was in the last set, since it was new.
Yeah, this one is a little weird with Ward 10. It's more of a meme than it is actually like anything else, because that's, with that and the removal spell that can kill a 10/10, you're likely not ever going to be able to touch this card. So this is a bit of a meme Ward, but there are other Ward cards in the set that, you know, have a more reasonable cost that's actually going to be affecting it. But yeah, this card is just all flavor.
Yeah, I don't want to be in the way of that thing.
All right, guys, so that is the end of our introduction to the Forgotten Realms new Magic set. This is going to be live on Arena on the 8th, and then after that it'll come to paper. Pre-release I believe is the 15th, and then the 23rd for release, if I'm not mistaken.
23rd is release, yeah, I believe pre-release is the 15th. It's that weekend though.
Yep, so you guys can pick up your paper product, go to pre-releases now that some of the stores are starting to open back up on the 15th and the 23rd, and then like I said, on Arena in 3 days from the time you're seeing this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow I'll be starting to post the next couple of color set reviews over the next 3 days. I hope you guys enjoyed them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys. I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you who have signed up for our Patreon. I couldn't make this content without you. Also to Cool Stuff Inc. and KMC Sleeves for supporting the channel as well. Definitely check them out and use our discount codes to support the channel.